What happened in Muscat just days ago could be one of the most surprising twists in the Iran-U.S. confrontation yet. In Oman's capital, diplomats from Tehran and Washington sat down, not face to face, but through mediators, for the first round of talks in months. After hours of negotiations focused on Iran's nuclear program, both sides described the meetings as a good start and agreed to continue dialogue, even though deep distrust remains and no concrete deal was reached. Some markets even jumped on optimism about reduced tension, but critics warned real breakthroughs are far from guaranteed. So, what does this cautious optimism really mean? And why does a diplomatic exchange in Muscat feel like it might influence the future of global peace, especially when the roots of this conflict stretch back to another war entirely? To understand today's crisis, we have to return to World War II in 1939. As Europe plunged into chaos, Iran declared itself neutral. Neutral to whom? Neutral to everyone, to the Allies led by Britain and the Soviet Union, and to the Axis powers led by Nazi Germany. At least, that was the plan. Iran's ruler at the time, Reza Shah, believed neutrality was the only way to protect his country from being torn apart by foreign empires. Iran had already spent decades being bullied by Britain and Russia. This time, the Shah wanted distance, independence, control, so he played a dangerous balancing act. Iran maintained diplomatic ties with Britain and the Soviet Union, but quietly expanded economic relations with Germany, which had no colonial history in Iran and offered engineers, trade, and technology. To Tehran, Germany looked less like a conqueror and more like a counterweight to British and Russian dominance. But geography doesn't respect neutrality. Iran sat on vast oil reserves, the lifeblood of modern warfare, and more importantly, it sat between the Allies and the Soviet Union. When Hitler invaded the USSR in 1941, Iran suddenly became the shortest, safest supply route for Allied weapons, fuel, and food. The Trans-Iranian corridor could decide the fate of the Eastern Front. To the Allies, Iran wasn't neutral. It was essential. In August 1941, British forces stormed in from the south. Soviet troops poured in from the north. The justification was simple. Iran, they claimed, had grown too close to Nazi Germany and posed a strategic risk during World War II. Within weeks, Iran's army collapsed. Resistance was futile. Reza Shah, the strongman ruler who had tried to modernize and centralize Iran, was forced to abdicate. He was exiled, erased from power, and quietly removed from history's stage. In his place, the Allies installed his young and inexperienced son, Mohammad Reza Shah, a king chosen not by Iranians, but by foreign powers. The world moved on after World War II. Iran never really did. As the post-war order settled, Britain's grip on the Middle East weakened, and a new power stepped in. The United States, Iranian oil, vast, valuable, and strategic, remained under foreign control. At home, resentment grew. To many Iranians, independence felt like an illusion. Then, in 1951, something remarkable happened. Iran democratically elected a prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh. Calm, principled, and fiercely nationalist, Mossadegh did what many thought impossible. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. For Iranians, it was dignity reclaimed. For Washington and London, it was a threat. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated Operation Ajax, a covert coup that overthrew Mossadegh and restored the Shah's authority. Democracy was crushed quietly. The Shah returned, not as a constitutional monarch, but as a U.S.-backed ruler, armed, funded, and protected by the West. On the surface, Iran looked stable. The economy grew. Tehran modernized. But beneath that surface, anger was fermenting. Political dissent was crushed. The Shah's secret police, Savik, silenced critics through fear, torture, and surveillance. Iran was transforming, but many Iranians felt they were losing their identity in the process. And this is where Ayatollah Khomeini enters the story. Khomeini was not a general or a politician. He was a cleric from a modest background who watched Iran drift deeper under Western influence. In the early 1960s, he openly challenged the Shah's reforms, condemning corruption, American interference, and what he saw as the erosion of Islamic values. His words struck a nerve. Among the poor, the religious, and the humiliated, Khomeini's sermons spread like wildfire. In 1963, the Shah arrested him. Protests erupted across Iran. Rather than execute him and risk martyrdom, the regime exiled Khomeini, first to Turkey, then Iraq, and eventually France. It was meant to end his influence. It did the opposite. From exile, Khomeini became more powerful than ever. His speeches were recorded on cassette tapes and smuggled into Iran. They spread through mosques, markets, and universities. He reframed the Shah as a puppet of the United States and cast resistance as both a religious duty and a national struggle. Over 15 years, Khomeini became the voice of Iran's suppressed rage. By the late 1970s, Iran was on the brink. Economic inequality, repression, and cultural alienation collided. Protests paralyzed the country. The army hesitated, and in 1979, Khomeini returned to Iran to one of the largest public welcomes in human history. Within months, the monarchy collapsed. But Khomeini didn't just replace the Shah, he rewrote the system. He dismantled rival political forces, sidelined secular liberals and leftists, and introduced Velayat al-Faqih, the rule of the Islamic jurist. Ultimate power now rested with him. The Islamic Republic of Iran was born. The break with the United States became total. And when Iranian students seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran, taking American diplomats hostage, decades of tension hardened into permanent mistrust. Then came the war that would define a generation. In 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq invaded Iran. Why? Fear, ambition, opportunity. Saddam ruled Iraq through a secular, authoritarian Ba'athist regime. Iran's Islamic Revolution terrified him. Iraq's population was majority Shia, ruled by a Sunni-led government. Saddam feared Khomeini's revolutionary message could ignite rebellion inside his own borders. There was also territory at stake. The Shatt al-Arab waterway, a vital channel giving Iraq access to the Persian Gulf. Saddam believed Iran, weakened by revolution, would collapse quickly. On September 25, 1980, Iraqi tanks rolled across the border. He was wrong. For Khomeini, the invasion became both a threat and an opportunity. The war allowed him to crush internal opposition and unite the nation under a banner of Islamic nationalism. Defending Iran was framed not just as patriotism, but as a religious obligation. The war was brutal. Cities were destroyed. Chemical weapons were used. Human wave attacks shocked the world. Hundreds of thousands died. Yet Iran endured. By 1988, the war ended with no clear winner. Borders barely changed. But Iran emerged hardened, traumatized, and unified. The lesson was clear: survival required self-reliance and deep distrust of the West. After Khomeini's death in 1989, his system endured. His successor, Ali Khamenei, inherited a state built on resistance and defiance. Iran rebuilt quietly while expanding its regional influence. Proxy groups, like Hezbollah, became tools of strategic depth. The Revolutionary Guards evolved into a powerful force projecting Iran's influence abroad. Then came the 21st century. After 9/11, the U.S. toppled Saddam Hussein, ironically removing Iran's greatest enemy. Tehran moved quickly, filling the vacuum in Iraq. By 2003, Iran's nuclear program drew intense scrutiny. It became a symbol of sovereignty, deterrence, and leverage. Sanctions followed. So did negotiations. In 2015, the nuclear deal briefly offered hope. But in 2018, the U.S. withdrew, reigniting hostility. Tensions escalated, tankers were seized, drones struck targets, and in 2020, the assassination of Qassem Soleimani pushed the region to the edge of war. Yet still, both sides stopped short. Today, the story continues. Recent talks in Muscat, Oman, highlight just how fragile the moment is. Diplomats speak cautiously. Optimism is measured. History looms heavily over every handshake. For Iran, compromise is tactical. Survival is paramount. For the United States, containment and security remain central. Decades of coups, wars, revolutions, and sanctions echo in every decision. This is not just a nuclear dispute. It is a century-long struggle over sovereignty, power, and identity. And as the world watches events unfold, from Muscat's quiet meeting rooms to the restless waters of the Strait of Hormuz, one truth remains undeniable. When it comes to Iran and the United States, the past is never really past. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.